Yuki Tsunoda's Red Bull racing stint showed signs of promise early on after his sudden promotion for the third race of the season in Japan. But not only has he failed to build on that, he's regressed alarmingly with an ignominious Austrian Grand Prix weekend a new low. His struggles, and those of Liam Lawson before him, mean Red Bull is effectively a one-car team this year. Max Verstappen has won 2 Grand Prix and amassed 155 points, with just 7 contributed by his teammates, all of those by Tsunoda, who has not scored in the last 4 races. History is repeating itself painfully for Red Bull. It has lurched from crisis to crisis with its second car ever since Daniel Ricciardo left for Renault at the end of 2018, and that cost it the Constructors' Championship in 2024. What's more, the lack of help for Verstappen in races by having a teammate nearby means he's increasingly isolated up front. With Lawson producing arguably his strongest Grand Prix weekend yet in Austria, qualifying and finishing 6th, his predecessor Sergio Perez grabbing the headlines with his comments about Red Bull, ongoing rumours about Verstappen possibly forcing a move away from the team, and McLaren being utterly dominant, Red Bull is teetering on the brink of disarray. Verstappen's first lap retirement and Tsunoda's dismal weekend in Austria meant Red Bull had its first pointless weekend since the season opening Bahrain Grand Prix in 2022. Verstappen's early exit was a reminder of just how exposed Red Bull is without him. As team principal Christian Horner put it was a home race to forget, but he has far more to worry about than just one bad weekend. First and foremost, it's growing Tsunoda problem. So what's gone so badly wrong for Tsunoda? The simple answer is that his qualifying performances have fallen off a cliff, and not from an especially high starting point. Increasingly, he has also struggled for race pace. The Austrian Grand Prix weekend exemplified his problems, with Tsunoda baffled after his worst race for Red Bull, one described by Horner as horrible. He finished 2 laps down in 16th place, last of the finishers. Circumstances played a part in that, but he wouldn't have finished much higher given his level of performance. Tsunoda put this down to tyres that were melting and admitted to a big pace deficit. Tsunoda is always honest, but couldn't explain why he struggled so much. In his early outings there were promising signs, and he argued it was all about building understanding of the car over time. But 9 races in, he seems more lost than ever. In Austria, he gained a couple of places with a good start and in turn 1, then lost a position avoiding the melee caused when Verstappen was wiped out by Kimi Antonelli at the hairpin before being shuffled down to 16th. He took the restart between Esteban Ocon's Haas and Nico Hülkenberg's Sauber, 2 cars that went on to finish in the points. A Red Bull should be beating them comfortably, but Tsunoda's race pace was poor. He dropped out of midfield contention when he hit Franco Colapinto's Alpine at turn 4, forcing a front wing change and earning him a 10-second penalty. While he couldn't compare his race pace to Verstappen directly, Tsunoda suggested that he was at least 0.4 of a second slower than his teammates. The big concern is that Tsunoda isn't certain where he's losing the time. He says he's not sure if he's doing something completely wrong, and it's not obvious in the data given he doesn't believe his driving style is that different to Verstappen's. At first, Tsunoda said he was confident in the Red Bull, but as he's become more familiar with the car, he's found it to have a narrow window and difficult to extract the speed from. The team believes that the key to success for whoever Verstappen's teammate is to accept they won't be as quick and find a setup they can drive with confidence. For while the car has many vices Verstappen doesn't enjoy, the pointy characteristics with a super sharp front end and therefore a rear end only an extraordinary driver can deal with is also a big challenge. There are mitigating factors, such as the fact Tsunoda spent several races behind on car spec, which was the consequence of his Imola Q1 shunt, and the fact he dropped into the car with little notice, having started the season with Racing Bulls. It's also worth noting that with the field very tightly compressed, his pace deficit to Verstappen in qualifying in Austria wasn't terrible. In Q1 he was just 0.263 seconds slower than Verstappen, who was 6th fastest, but that difference was enough to put Tsunoda down in 18th, meaning he was eliminated in the first stage of qualifying. Indeed, this increasingly compact field spread is exposing the long-standing Red Bull second driver weakness more starkly than ever before. The fact Tsunoda is struggling so badly after 9 race weekends, and with testing mileage in Pirelli tyre testing, as well as rain-hit 2023 car running at Silverstone, means an all too familiar story is repeating at Red Bull as yet another very good F1 driver is made to look terrible. And that raises questions about whether he could find himself replaced for 2026 or even earlier, presumably with Isaac Hadjar, who is impressing in his rookie season, the next in line to be ruined by promotion. One of Tsunoda's predecessors, Sergio Perez, has been very punchy recently on the topic of being dropped by Red Bull at the end of last year. Perez, who is chasing an F1 return in 2026 and has been linked to both Alpine and the new Cadillac team, claimed in an appearance on the Desde El Paddock podcast, hosted by three-time Daytona 24 Hours winner Memo Rojas, that Red Bull regrets axing him. Perez's troubles will seem very familiar to Tsunoda. In his 4 seasons with Red Bull, he had some real high points, 5 victories, and then finishing second to Verstappen in the championship in 2023, but he often struggled badly. In particular, after his strong start to 2024, his form slumped. He racked up 103 points in the first 6 events and was given a new 2-year contract at the Monaco Grand Prix, but in the 16 race weekends that followed, he managed a paltry 45 points. He talks of having to drive the car with full conscious effort and criticised the development direction that even Verstappen disapproved of. Red Bull paid off Perez at the end of the year, having lost confidence in him, leading to the short-lived promotion of Liam Lawson. That was extremely expensive, and given Lawson's ditching after 2 races and Tsunoda's struggles, you could argue Perez has a point about the car being the real problem. However, that slump at the end of last season means that he wasn't doing much better than Tsunoda. A comparison of Tsunoda's first 9 Grand Prix results for Red Bull and Perez's final 9 is proof of that. Tsunoda managed 4 points compared to Perez's 12, with a scoreline 7-13 if you factor in sprints. Yes, Perez's record is better, but it's hardly night and day. Perez was paid off by Red Bull because he wasn't delivering, and while he would surely have scored more points than Lawson and Tsunoda have managed between them so far, there's nothing to say he would have been any more effective than he was at the back end of last year. Verstappen himself defended Perez, as he did Lawson and Tsunoda since, but that's all because the core problem is how difficult the Red Bull is to drive. If it takes a driver of Verstappen's virtuosity to extract performance from the car, Red Bull can't be surprised that a sequence of good but not great F1 drivers have had such a painful time. And while Red Bull might not regret dropping Perez as strongly as he says, there's no question that he's a far better driver than his poor results for much of last year would suggest, and the same can be said of Tsunoda. Red Bull's dependence on Verstappen to get results puts it in a difficult situation. He has a contract to the end of 2028, but there have been persistent rumours about the possibility he might leave. And there's some substance to that because Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff has been very open about his interest in Verstappen's services over the past 18 months. That discussion point again flared up during the Austrian Grand Prix weekend, with George Russell saying conversations between Mercedes senior management and the likes of Verstappen are ongoing. The only reason Russell doesn't have a Mercedes deal in his pocket for 2026 is the possibility Verstappen might become available. Although some of the stories that have emerged about the exact terms of his contract and the results that could allow him to leave are wide of the mark, there are mechanisms in it that could allow Verstappen to depart. After all, if a driver wants to walk away, then there's always a way to do it. It would be a concern for any team to lose a driver of Verstappen's qualities given he's an all-time great, but it's doubly worrying for Red Bull given it's a struggle to find a driver who can extract the same performance from a tricky car that Verstappen can. As Horner says, the car has evolved over the years in a specific direction, meaning to favour Verstappen. That's an oversimplification, as while it's true to say Verstappen has the preference for a pointy car that relies on his preternatural skills to control, it's also one with a narrow window that only Verstappen seems to be able to mitigate the weaknesses of. An unstable car, but one the driver can control precisely, will be a seriously quick one, even though it's tricky to drive. But he's not been happy with the characteristics of the Red Bull for several years. Verstappen also wants a more competitive car. He said repeatedly that he doesn't even think about the World Championship right now and knows Red Bull needs to make some big steps to have any chance of doing so. He's now 61 points behind Championship leader Oscar Piastri and doubts that the upgrades Red Bull is planning will allow it to challenge McLaren. And to come back to what Perez has been saying, he blames Red Bull's struggles on the departure of Adrian Newey, who left the team last year and is now at Aston Martin. The timeline isn't quite that straightforward, but as Newey was feeling increasingly marginalised in the run-up to his decision to leave, it's clear his influence had waned even before he left. And this is making it difficult for Red Bull to fix its problems. It's simple enough to say just make the car easier to drive, but it's not that straightforward, especially if you want it to be quick. Were Verstappen to leave Red Bull, it would leave the team in a difficult situation, without a driver who can extract performance from its current car, and with the top guns in rival teams locked down to longer contracts. That's what makes Tsunoda's situation so troubling. His travails may appear to be just another chapter in the never-ending story of second drivers proving unable to get close to Verstappen. But it's that chance, no matter how slim, that Verstappen could walk away that risks collapsing Red Bull's house of cards. And it's those same car problems that are making life impossible for Tsunoda and Lawson and Perez before him that might also persuade Verstappen to leave.